All right, so we got to figure out what we're doing. But I promise it'll be great.
Leadership.
I know.
Just as long as you do the introduction, because, well, either that
That means
or...
I can drive it where I want it to go.
That's why I like to know where you're going before
Nope.
you start.
No fun. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Matt and Fiona Show. Thank you so much for joining us. We are super happy that you are here. Again, as I've been saying the last couple of episodes, again, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to like and subscribe everywhere you're watching or listening to this. Because it's helpful to us. But today we're going to jump right into a topic of fun. This is something that I study a lot. I listen to a lot of stuff on, and I read a lot of books about.
Okay, fair enough.
We're talking about leadership. Now, we could take this in a variety of veins.
Yeah, which we just have discovered.
Yep. So today we're going to kind of stick to a little bit of the church leadership vein because one, again, this comes out on Tuesday. On Wednesday, we'll be heading up to Dr. Barkley's leadership conference. So we're kind of priming the pump, if you will, with a little bit of leadership conversation before we head off to go to that conference. One of the things I love about that conference, and oddly enough, we've talked about conferences a couple times on this show, but the leadership conference does hit a little bit different. I've gone on record saying that my favorite one is the Help Conference, and that is still true. But I do love the leadership conference as well for different reasons.
Right, of course.
What I always find so exciting and encouraging about the leadership conference is there's always a bit of a conversation about or some preaching about or whatever about the vein of, everyone can be a leader, right? There are many people who are called to be leaders, and then there's a lot of people who lead by example and help. Again, as leaders, but as, tiered down.
Yep, second
leaders
tier,
a little
third
bit.
tier.
And, I think when it comes to church leadership and trying to be a leader in the church realm, right? That everybody wants to be that top, right? Everybody's looking at being the number one, the pastor,
A majority.
Yeah,
People,
right.
yeah.
Which you don't always have that in the business world, right? Not everyone wants that responsibility,
Right.
right? But when you're in church leadership, it's a little different.
Yeah, even if they don't want to be a pastor, they want to be the prophet, or they want
Yes. They want
right?
they want a position.
They want a position. They want a stronger.
They want a leadership position.
Yes, a stronger title.
And I think one of the differences in general leadership versus church leadership is that you have a buy-in to some degree in regular leadership, right? People are there and they're submitting to leaders,
Right.
to some degree because they're getting paid,
Uh,
right? In church, you typically don't have that tag.
not the driving force.
There's no that's not there. So there's submission stuff that comes up. There's quality of leadership stuff that comes up. There's a lot of things that come up, and the connector of it is spiritual, which is that can be stronger or weaker depending on the individual.
Right.
Right. By contrast, the place where you have the biggest buy-in is military leadership.
Oh.
because everybody's bought in.
Mm.
They signed up for this stuff.
Yes.
So it's a different level
Different
and
mentality.
a different mentality completely. So when it comes to church leadership, one of the hardest things is that there is a big volunteer mentality
Right.
that comes up. So,
Oof.
you know,
That's true.
I've kind of gone through all phases of this, minus the top tier leader, because I'm not there.
Right.
I don't want to be there.
Right.
But I've gone from being the lowest person that's just kind of hanging around all the way up through all the levels.
Yeah.
Right. And it's really hard to be an effective leader when you're dealing with volunteers. Because if they have that volunteer mindset,
yes, who have that volunteer mentality.
There's no accountability there. There's no submission there. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And not everybody has this. And I'm not trying to say that everyone in church just has that volunteer mindset. But it is challenging. Leadership is hard enough when you have people that have bought in. When you're dealing with it, or if you're treating them, the people that are under you, just as volunteers and that they're disposable, that's not any better.
Yep.
You know, we've talked a little bit on this show in episodes past about, you know, submitting to your leadership, submitting to your leader, submitting to your pastor, right? And that is, I'm not going to say that's easy to do per se, but it is easier to do. Easier. Work with me here.
All right, I'm working with you.
But when you get into that second and third tier leadership, it's really hard to submit to that person.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And, you know, we've kind of, you and I,
Yes.
have gotten to a point where we're in leadership now. And like, I've been a leader of my department, or my main department,
Right.
from the tech side for years.
As long as we've been married.
Yeah. But it's also it's a smaller team. It's always been a smaller team. We're tight knit. We get a lot of stuff done. But it's a smaller team.
Right.
Right. As you grow and as our roles have expanded,
Yes.
we're now completely second tier.
Yeah.
Right. So there's pastor, and then there's me. And then there's you. Right in there because of the roles that we both hold now.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the hardest things that happen especially in a church situation, a lot of times is when someone like myself,
Right.
who's a pastor's kid, slowly elevates his way up.
Yep.
Right. And it takes a lot for people to go from 1 year where, for example, if I was ushering,
Right.
which again, I haven't done in years, but if I was ushering and then a couple years later, I'm no longer under the ushers, I'm in charge of the ushers.
Yes.
And that takes a lot, right? And it's something where, as believers, we've got some really good examples of leadership and delegated authority and things, right? To show us how to deal with this.
Yep.
But quite often, because we're people, we don't want to look at those things. We don't want to deal with that. And, you know, I continually come back to the whole, I'm going to do what I'm going to do.
Right.
And I'm going to submit to my leader. I'm going to do everything pastor asks of me. And hopefully do it with a smile on my face.
Right.
Right.
And with a heart of gratitude.
Ooh, that's a throwback to last week's. But I'm going to work really hard to do that. And hopefully everyone else follows along.
Right.
But like even in our own local church, we've dealt with and still kind of deal with occasionally situations where pastor will tell me to do something,
Right.
and I'll go tell whoever he told me to tell to do whatever
Yeah.
he told me to tell them to do. And I'll get this look of, well, I'm not doing what you told me to do. And then what I love is quite often, they'll run away and go find pastor. And can you believe what Matt told me to do? And he'll kind of do oh, really? What did he tell you to do? And they'll tell him, and he'll go, interesting. Because I typically will not go and say, hey, pastor told me to tell you to do this.
Right.
Because he didn't. He told me to go have so-and-so do whatever it is.
Right.
And they'll go complaining, but pastor will do well, yeah, I told him to tell you to do that. Which, again, goes back to the centurion soldier and delegated authority.
Right.
Right? And again, this is not a Matt power trip thing. This is a
heart thing.
Well, it's a heart thing, but it's also I grew up going through this.
Uh-huh.
And not from the side that you're thinking, but from the side of again, being a pastor's kid, I had a direct line to pastor all the time.
Yep.
But when we had someone who was in charge of ministry of helps, and then someone who was in charge of ushers or greeters or AV before I was, or whatever, I had to go through and know that I'm submitted through like 3 different chains at one point before I got to pastor, who's the person I came to church with.
Yeah. Yes.
It's something where, as believers, if we can collectively learn how to do this.
Well, can I just
jump in?
Okay, so you had said something earlier, about that whole volunteer mentality thing and dealing with leadership and so on and so forth. And I think, again, it always comes down to a heart issue, but what I come back to is, and again, we are in a leadership position. Every aspect of leadership position that I'm currently in right now, I did not ask for.
Yeah. Ditto.
And did not expect to be in any of these. That was not my plan or role or anything. It also goes to show you that God has a plan and a purpose, and you've got to be careful for self-appointed versus God-appointed.
Yeah.
Which is a whole other element that I wasn't planning to go to, but you do need to be careful of that. And when you're in the church, a believer, walking as a Christian, you need to be careful of that because you want the things in your life to be God-appointed and not self-appointed. But aside from that, that volunteer mentality that a lot of people have within the church, even within leadership roles sometimes, we need to realize and recognize that, albeit, the difference between, the world and working for a corporation or whatnot and the church, naturally speaking, if you take out the spiritual side, there's a difference. You're working for your livelihood versus, you're volunteering. But what you need to recognize and realize is you're not just volunteering, you're working for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and you're working for the one who supplies all things and has literally given you your life. And I think that heart difference within you, can be a challenging shift.
Yeah.
Because we're almost programmed for that, well, I need that paycheck, I need that income, I need that world system to function for me so that I could survive. Instead of recognizing and realize that God gave that world system to help you function and survive. And you have to take that shift. And in the church, again, we're grateful for volunteers. We're grateful for the other leaders and the people who help in, head over the various departments and whatnot, because we can't do it all. And same with every single church.
Watch me. No.
I have. No, I'm just kidding. But with every single church, we need a variety of leaders within the church, with children's church, even just the leader to deal with the children's church for the day. If you are that head teacher, that day you're a leader. I mean, within the church, there's so many varying levels of leadership. There's so many varying positions. Some of them are constant leadership positions, and some of them you're placed in them at particular moments in time.
Yep.
But when you have that role of a leader within the church, we've got to get rid of that volunteer mentality. Because who are we volunteering for? Jesus? That kind of dumbs down what you're doing. Because when you are there and when you are doing whatever it is you're doing, and to be honest, whether you're a leader or whether you're a helper, this doesn't really matter. But every time that you go to church and you're doing something, whatever position it is, you're doing it for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You're doing it for your Savior. You're doing it for Jesus Christ himself. In our church, you're not doing it for us. You're not doing it for the pastor. You're doing it for Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that so often gets looked over. I mean, because you hear that, oh man, can you believe what they need me to do? Or man, they're asking me again. And we need to just be careful. And again, this comes back to that whole spirit of familiarity or lacking that gratitude.
Yep. You hit on it a second ago. Who are you working for?
Yeah.
Right. And again, this applies whether you are a worker, whether you're a helper, whether you're a leader, whether you're a boss, it doesn't matter. But who are you working for?
Yeah.
So if you go ask someone to do something,
Right.
Or if I go ask someone to do something, or if pastor goes ask someone to do something, whether pastor asks me to ask you, whether he asks my son Cohen to go ask you to go do something,
done.
right? If your heart's in the right place, if you are there serving Jesus, serving your Lord, then it doesn't matter who asks you to do it, because it's not that person who's asking you. Right?
Yep.
You're not doing it because, and this is one of those things that when we do our helps meeting, this is one of the things that I try to hit on all the time, is you're not cleaning bathrooms for me.
No.
You're not vacuuming carpets for me. You're not ushering for me. You're not greeting for me. I don't care if you usher or greet or do overheads or run the soundboard or run cameras.
We appreciate you for doing it.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
But, yeah, exactly.
But I don't care if you do it, because I'll just find somebody else.
Right.
Or we'll automate the process. Or worst case, I'll pay somebody to come in and do it. We'll get this done.
Yes.
Right? But if your mindset is that you're volunteering or you're leading a team because I asked you to do it and you're doing it for me, then your heart's not in the right spot.
No, not at all.
Right? If and again, I'm saying me because in our church, I'm in charge of our helps department, amongst everything else. But if I'm asking you to do something, it's because pastor has essentially asked me to deal with it. Right?
Or he's asking you to do it so that pastor doesn't know.
Doesn't have to deal with it.
Doesn't have to deal with it. Find out about it. Sometimes pastors don't need to know.
Oh, they don't need to know.
They don't need to know if the toilet needs cleaning. We just need it cleaned.
Yeah. We don't, and this is an approach that we've taken for years, of whenever possible, we're trying to not bother pastor with things.
The less pastor is bothered with, the more time he can spend in prayer and study, so that he can hear from the Holy Spirit, so that he can change our lives.
Yeah. It's one of those things where trying to be an effective leader is challenging.
Yeah.
Right. It takes a lot of work. Um, but having your heart in the right place and knowing why you're doing it
Yeah.
is a really good start to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And then trying to instill that to everyone who's below you,
Right.
for lack of a better
Yeah.
term, right? And to that next tier of leadership,
Mm-hmm.
right? Trying to encourage them to understand the same thing
Mm-hmm.
and teach their people the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is so effective when it catches hold,
Yeah.
right? Because when it catches hold, then it's not, you don't have these issues of, well, I don't like that person, I can't submit to them,
Oof.
right? Or he's a jerk,
Right.
or he's rude, or he's sharp. And yes, I'm just using examples of me. But, if our heart's in the right spot, then that doesn't matter. Now, to flip the script for a second,
Mm-hmm.
there also are
Okay.
there are some toxic leaders. There are some harsh leaders,
Yeah.
and for no reason. There's honestly just some really bad leaders.
Right.
And I've seen that in church.
Mm-hmm.
Not more than I've seen it outside of church, but at a disturbingly high level.
Yeah.
Right? And again, you said something earlier. Self-appointed leaders typically are different,
Right.
right? And those are the ones you got to watch
Yeah.
because they're self-appointed. But typically, if you're dealing with someone who is in one of those couple of veins, the Holy Spirit's going to show that to you.
Uh-huh.
And the Holy Spirit's also going to show the leadership above that individual,
Yeah.
right? So hopefully it's not something that has to be dealt with that often,
Yeah.
right? But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to, there are lots of great ways to be a leader,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's some really good biblical examples of how to be a leader,
Absolutely.
right? And especially when you're dealing in church, right? If you hold a leadership position in your company, right? The way you do that
Mm-hmm.
is not necessarily the same way you're going to do that in church,
Right.
right? It's a balance of understanding that and recognizing how to do that. But again, you can look to the Bible, you can look to the leaders in the Bible and have a really good blueprint for how to be a good leader.
I think this is the other thing, right? Going back to what I had said earlier and what we talked about, where when you are in a leadership position, you are serving Jesus first and foremost.
Yep.
Because you're in that leadership position and you are serving Jesus first and foremost, pray about your position.
Yeah.
Spend time in prayer about it. Spend time asking the Lord for wisdom, not only for yourself, but for the people that are under you or alongside of you, right? Not only that, pray for strength, pray for wisdom, pray for the leaders above you. And I think what we need to do very often, and what tends to get overlooked when we take, or too often we don't involve Jesus in our leadership positions as much as we should. And it's going to happen. And, sometimes we do take so much onto ourselves that we forget that he's anointed us and put us in that position, and we don't utilize the strength that he's put inside of us, and we try to do it all on our own.
Yeah.
But we are not given leadership position. Any God-appointed leadership position is just that. It is a God-appointed leadership position to which he has anointed us, created us, called us for. And we need to remember that. We need to keep our sights on him. And we need to make sure that we spend time in prayer, ask him for strength to get through, ask him for wisdom. I mean, any leadership positions, there's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be speed bumps. You're dealing with people.
Yep.
And, some people are much easier to deal with than others. And that's okay. But if we go to him and we recognize that it's a God-appointed position, and we walk it through with him, we then become better leaders ourselves, better encouragers, and we will be able to better manage the teams. Yep. So not only do we need to pray for ourselves, but also I think it's very important, pray for the rest of the leadership above us,
yep,
with us. And just remember that when we do this, again, contrary to the world, in God's system, we need to include him in it.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. It seems so simplistic, but we sometimes forget. Again, our head gets in the way. We tend to forget, and sometimes we try to do it all ourselves. And I even know for me, sometimes I look at it, I'm like, with everything that I'm doing, I'm like, Lord, how am I supposed to do all this right now? And I get overwhelmed.
You? I don't believe it.
I mean, not very often.
No.
But no, I do. I get overwhelmed, and I kind of look at the daunting task. I'm like, how am I supposed to balance all these balls? And how am I supposed to find the solution for this? And I find myself taking it on myself, making it my positions, instead of realizing, oh, wait, God put me here on purpose. God's put inside of me what I need in order to carry this out and be successful with it. Because he would have not put me in this position if he didn't have the solution already created for it. And for me, sometimes, and I've got favorite scriptures through different parts of my life, but one of my scriptures that I used to always go to was be still and know that I am God. And that's still something that I still need to do. I need to stop, sit back, and realize, okay, wait, I've been created to do this, anointed to do this. And as long as I do it with my God and remember the reason why I'm doing it, this is not a me thing, it's a him thing.
Yep.
And when I could get to the point where I realize, because sometimes I forget or it's not in my forefront, I've got to kind of bring myself back and recognize, okay, wait, you know what? The Lord's hand is on this. He's got me. I'm his daughter. And he's given me everything that I need to do so that I can take care of everything that's in front of me. And when we make sure to pull God back into it, and we make sure that our focus is on him, and we remind ourselves and remember that we are doing all of this for him, then we are anointed, filled with wisdom to be able to succeed and carry out everything that's in front of us.
Well, again, when you take that position, right, then everything else falls away. Right? All the personality conflicts fall away.
Yep.
All the, I don't like that person falls away. All of the drama falls away.
Yeah, when it's no longer about them and you, and it's about him.
Yep. As long as your heart's in the right place, either leading or submitting is significantly easier.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're having a hard time submitting to someone, or if you're having a hard time leading someone, those are the things to start looking into of, okay, what's going on? Because if you guys are both following Jesus properly, the way the Bible tells us to, you don't have a problem submitting to that person.
No.
And you shouldn't have a big problem leading that person either.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So go check your heart condition. As that's kind of been the theme the last 3 or 4 episodes.
Yeah.
But thanks again for joining us. We're going to wrap up there. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on all the socials under the Matt and Fiona Show. Wherever you're watching or listening to this, please like and subscribe and all that jazz. Otherwise, we will see you next week for another episode of the Matt and Fiona Show. See you.
All right. Bye now.